Hi guys, I'm Kasha. Welcome to our coffee times to talk about horror. And today I'm here to let you know all of the interesting thrillers and horror books that are coming out in the month of June.
It's coffee time!
In today's list, I have a total of 37 books that are going to be published in June. These range from regular thrillers, some horror, some mix between thriller and horror, and I have some YA books, some adult books as always. This is obviously not a complete list of releases for the month because there are so many more that get published every month, but these are the ones that I thought were interesting, and some of them, while I was doing the list, I ended up pre-ordering. RIP to my bank account, but honestly, in the month of June, we're getting fed, you guys. We're getting fed. So let's go and talk about 37 books that are coming out in June. May the coffee gods be with you. The first book I would like to talk to you about is a book I have heard nobody talk about, but it is a book about vampires. And this one sounds extremely interesting, and I need this book in my life. The book is called The Vampire of Vorla and Other Greek Vampire Tales, and it is edited by Álvaro García Marín, and I love the concept for this book. Normally, vampires are associated with Eastern Europe or Transylvania, but there are studies that show that actually vampires or vampire tales, let's put it better that way, originated in Greece. This book includes some classic texts, and also they add some that have never been published before, and I think it's really interesting, and I definitely need this book in my life. So as someone like me that is really obsessed and fascinated by vampires, and that I have read myself many of those classic older texts and little stories about vampires, I am so fascinated by it, and I kind of need this book in my life. Small Town Horror by Ronald Malfi is a horror thriller, and this one I'm really excited about as well because it sounds a little bit similar to It by Stephen King. We have 5 friends that reunite years later in their hometown in order to confront dark secrets from their past, as well as try to solve a curse that might be upon them. So our main character gets a call from one of the friends. He has to go back to their hometown, and then they start talking about the past and what happened and why they feel like they're cursed. It kind of feels like It Chapter 2 in a way, and I love this type of stories. Take All of Us by Natalie Leaf, and this is YA horror. This is a post-apocalyptic story in which there is some sort of bacteria that gets into the water in a small town and turns people into almost undead. Their eyes turn black and they have seizures. They are not able to do everything physically that they were able to do before. So our main character Ian and a group of friends are trying to kind of mercy kill them because the state that they are in is not a way of living, and that is until Ian has an accident himself and realizes also that Eric, his best friend slash love interest, I think, he realizes that Eric is not such a good person as he thought he was. But I'm really excited about, a queer post-apocalyptic tale, and to see this kind of different take on the undead with the black eyes and the oil dripping that it's described on the synopsis. So I'm really excited for this. Youth Juice by E.K. Sathue, and this is a horror thriller. And this sounds very modern, but also, I guess, a story as old as time, that things are not always what they seem, and the more you start digging somewhere, you might find out things you were not supposed to see. It says American Psycho meets The Devil Wears Prada, but with a lot of gore. Need I say more? I think I already sold it, you guys. So Sophia is almost 30, she's 29, and she's working now in this new company that sells kind of like luxury beauty products. The CEO of the company is very charismatic and she doesn't want to be a problem in the company because, like I said, she's getting older, she needs to keep her job, and she starts also using the products of this company, and she starts investigating more and more and digging deeper into the company when she makes very dark discoveries about it. Nothing is really what it seems, especially not the formula and the ingredients used in their products. Then we have Brad by Gabrielle Smith, and this is horror, but kind of like bizarre, strange horror with a little bit of humor. We meet Gabriel, and Gabriel is someone that is currently really struggling. He doesn't reach rock bottom yet, but kind of almost. It's mourning the death of his father, and he also had a recent breakup. He's also struggling to finish his second book because he's a writer, and he decides to move back to his dad's home in order to try to look for inspiration for his novel. But when he's living in his, old parents' house, he realizes that the place is affecting him physically, like strips of his skin are peeling off. He hears things, he thinks he sees things, he finds some old manuscripts from his family, and I think this is going to go more into the strange and bizarre, kind of psychedelic almost, I guess, type of horror, so it depends if you are into that. Now, Conjurers by Freddie Koch, and this is a YA horror, and this one deals with witches, and I am obsessed with this cover. We are in the 90s, and one of our main characters discovers the dead body of a quarterback, really popular guy at school, but also in secret he was a witch. So in this town we have a coven, and they are now worried because one of them has been murdered, and it seems that something is coming to kill every single one of those witches, and they're gonna have to figure out what's going on before all of them are dead. And I'm excited. It can be potentially a new take on witchy books for YA readers, and like I said, I am obsessed with this cover. This one also includes the trope of found family, so if you love that in books and you also love books about witches and covens, then this is definitely one that you have to check out. Lockjaw by Matteo L. Cirilli, and this is a YA horror, and it is a debut with trans representation. Chuck died tragically, and Paz thinks that it was not an accident, that actually there is a monster below the town and she's determined to find it and to kill it. This is a story told through multiple perspectives because Paz looks for help on his besties. So all together they're trying to figure out what's going on in this town, what kind of monster they're dealing with in order to destroy it. So it's told from the multiple POV of the characters. A Dark and Endless Sea by Blaine Daigle, and this is a mystery horror. So Roger has been having dreams, horrible dreams, and it is the voices in his head that he hears that take him to kind of recruit on a ship, and while he's in the ship traveling, the nightmares get more and more intense. He starts to remember things while he is at sea, and he's starting to kind of put all the pieces of the puzzle together of his past and of his nightmares, while he still hears this voice in his head that is making him mad. Song of the Tyrant Worm, and this is book 3 on The Worm and His Kings by Hailey Piper. Now, I read the first one and I really enjoyed it, but I have to say it's not exactly my favorite type of horror because it is cosmic horror, and as you can tell by the titles, it does include worms and a worm king. I did enjoy the first book. We follow our main character that is trying to look for her girlfriend that has disappeared, and while she's looking for her, she ends up going deeper and deeper underground, and she ends up discovering this new world that includes the king worm. And I really enjoyed that novella. I thought it was great, but I'm not a huge fan of cosmic horror, so it is not exactly my cup of tea. I didn't pick up the second book, and I'm not gonna pick up the third, but like I said, it's only because cosmic horror is not something that I really love, but I thought it was well written. I enjoyed the story, and even though it was a crazy ride, I thought it was great. So if you do like cosmic horror, I think this might be a great trilogy for you guys to pick up. The Housemaid is Watching by Frida McFadden, and this is a mystery thriller. It is book 3 in The Housemaid, and I have been meaning to read this book. I still haven't. I have this one and I have The Teacher by the same author on my Kindle. So I think at some point I will try it. Let me know which one is your favorite from the two if you have read both of them. But if you have been keeping up with this series, just for you to know that number 3 is coming out in June. Crimson Cobblestones by Marie Lestrange, and this is horror. There are some grisly deaths, some murders are being committed in Philadelphia, and our main character, Charlotte, starts to kind of investigate those deaths, and she's going to get herself in trouble and discover a much wider cult that might be responsible for them. So this is a book about cults and about those types of societies and systems, and it really goes deeper into the organization, how they work and all of that, and how Charlotte is investigating them. So if you love books about cults, I think this is one that should go on your list. And of course Charlotte is investigating a huge cult, so what are you gonna do? Because if you expose them, they might come for you and they might kill you, but can you also keep a secret if it's something really, really gruesome? When the Night Falls by Glenn Rolfe, and this is horror that includes vampires, so this is one that is also immediately on my list. We are in a small beach town, and years ago there were several murders that really affected the town, but now things are back to business. The town has tourists again and everything seems to be going normal. And we follow Rocky, our main character, and he is kind of enjoying a quiet, private life, but he cannot forget that one of those monsters that were responsible for the killings years ago was the love of his life, the only girlfriend he ever had, because apparently she was a vampire. So he knows that monsters exist and he was in love with one of them. And now on top of that, there is a documentary that's going to be made about the murders. I love this trend about true crime documentaries slash podcasts that we are seeing on the rise in horror books. And honestly, I'm here for it because it is true that there are so many of those, and it feels kind of realistic that also new information or things might be discovered because of people digging deeper into the cases through podcasts and through documentaries. But anyways, I digress. I think while they are doing this documentary, they realize that actually the murders might have been committed by a vampire. The Night in the Library by Eva Jurczyk, and this is a horror mystery thriller, and this has a trope that I know you guys love and I love, which is a locked room mystery, but in this case the room is the library. On the night before graduation, 7 students decide to stay at the library at night. They hide so that when they close the door, they can stay inside to perform a ritual. And it is a ritual that they think it's going to remove the fear of death. So that is one of the biggest fears that we as humans have. And they want to perform a ritual to get rid of them, to get rid of this fear that they all have. But obviously, as they are locked in the library, they perform the ritual, and what happens is one of them drops dead. So probably they were lost in translation here. They might have done something wrong, and then something's coming for them basically, and there's no way out because they have been locked in the library. It's what they wanted, so I mean, good riddance. But this sounds like a lot of fun. Cuckoo by Gretchen Felker Martin, and this is another horror release. We are in the late 90s and we follow 5 queer kids that have been sent by their parents to a conversion camp. Fantastic. While they're dealing with these BS and these people trying to convert them, there is something in the mountains that speaks to them while they're sleeping. And when the kids are returned to their parents, they are changed. But not in the way that the parents expected. There's something wrong with them. Like, for real this time. Dead Girls Talking by Megan Cooley Peterson, and this is a YA mystery thriller. Everyone knows that Bettina's father is a murderer. Actually, the town calls him the smiley face killer, and he is paying for what he did. He also killed Bettina's mom, and the town has been making profit out of it. They have guided tours, they have documentaries, they probably have merchandise, like really disgusting stuff from them to do, and Bettina has to live in the midst of all of it. The worst part is there seems to be a copycat killer now, so Bettina is starting to really wonder if her father is actually that serial killer or not. And together with another girl, she's going to try to figure out what's happening. That other girl is Eugenia, who is the daughter of a mortician, and they join forces, and this is a book about, you know, getting justice, about female anger, and I'm really excited to get to this one. It has a true crime element to it as well, so it sounds great. Private Rights by Julia Armsfield, and this is a horror book, and this is also the author that wrote Our Wives Under the Sea, so if you enjoyed that one, she's coming up with a new book. So it's kind of like an end of the world scenario in which the world has become so flooded by water that humanity has had to rethink the way that we live, and now they had to find a way to build like houses and apartments to live above the water level. And in the midst of all of this, we have three sisters that lose their father and decide to go back to his place to empty it, to go through his things. And he is also one of the people that one of the architects that helped humanity to create these new housing systems. And they of course are gonna make some interesting discoveries in his house, and also that they might not be the only ones that can get his inheritance. Horror movie by Paul Tremblay, and this is a horror novel that I have obviously pre-ordered. This is one of the ones that I have pre-ordered because Paul Tremblay has done me no wrong so far. His books are very different, all of them, but I have enjoyed them, and so I'm really excited for this. We are in the 90s, and we follow a group of young filmmakers that are trying to make a horror movie, and you know, a lot of things happened on that set, and only 3 scenes were released from that recordings, and decades later, people are still really obsessed with those. So Hollywood 3 decades later is really pushing for a reboot. There is only one surviving member from that original young crew of filmmakers, and he starts to remember everything that happened during the recording and all of that. And I think we're gonna shift back and forth from present into past. This is supposed to be a twist on the cursed film trope, and I love that trope. Cursed movies, give them to me anytime, cursed objects, and so I'm really excited to see what Paul Tremblay does with this. One of a Kind by Nicola Yoon, and this is a thriller, and it's going to be the adult debut of the author. She has previously done a couple of books for young adult readers, and I have read a couple of her books as well. So I'm really intrigued to see what she does now with an adult thriller. So we are in America, and we follow a couple that wants to move to a place that it's supposed to be Black utopia, where, you know, they want to feel more at home and understood by their community, and when they hope to find people that are willing to fight for their rights, for their freedom, and when they move there, things seem to be okay, but then they realize that these people are not really fighting for what they should be fighting for. In fact, there are some weird things going on in this place. A Talent for Murder by Peter Swanson, and this is a detective mystery thriller. I think this is part of a detective series, like a mystery thriller series, but the majority of these books, you can also read them in any order you want. I've done it many times, but maybe you were already reading this series, so now you're getting the next book. We follow a newlywed librarian that starts to suspect that her husband might be a serial killer. So Martha felt like she was probably not gonna find her other half. She had kind of assumed that she was just gonna, you know, fly solo for the rest of her life, and she was content. But then she met this guy, and he was really cool and perfect, and she fell in love, and they married really quickly, and she didn't really know him that well before she says, "Yeah, I do." But she married him, and now they're living together, and she realizes that sometimes when he comes back from his business trips, one time she found, for example, like a couple of drops of blood on his blouse, and she started to check all the trips that he's taken, and it's all cities where there has been a murder. So she starts thinking like, wait a minute, wait a minute. Is it just coinkydink? Is it just coincidence that this guy is going to the same place where there is now open murder cases? Is she thinking about it too much, or is she actually living with a serial killer? The Wife at the Window by Kara Reynard, and this is another mystery thriller. Our main character had the perfect life. She was married, she had 2 kids, a boy and a girl, but then there was an accident and her younger daughter died, and a lot of people accused her of this, and they thought it was because of her that the daughter had the accident and died. And apart from suffering from that, her relationship with her husband started to deteriorate to the point where they separated, and now he lives with his new girlfriend and the son, I think just across the street. So this poor woman has to see her ex living with her son and with the new girlfriend, and she's trying to prove that this woman wanted her life and stole him from her, and she's also trying to prove her innocence in her daughter's death accident. I hope that makes sense, because it's a very kind of intricate mystery thriller. There's a lot of shots fired here, probably from both women. I'm guessing there's gonna be something wrong with this new girlfriend from, you know, the ex-husband, but this has the potential of a good domestic mystery thriller if that is what you are into. How to Make a Horror Movie and Survive by Craig DeLuey, and this is another horror book that I have pre-ordered because after reading episode 13 I really enjoyed it, and this one, you know, the premise sounds perfect for me. There's many books also coming out lately that have this trope of making a horror movie or having filmmakers, directors of horror movies involved, and I'm also living for it. We have here a famous horror director from the 80s that is now trying to make the scariest horror movie ever made, and he's using a camera that might be actually possessed by a demon. So I'm guessing he is actually going to get what he wanted, a terrifying horror movie. So Max should be really happy. You know, actors want to work with him, studios want to get his movies, and you know, he's tired in the 80s of making all of these cheap slashers, you know, cheesy movies. He wants to make something that is actually truly terrifying. But Max's producer is kind of rejecting all of his new ideas, and he decides to just do it anyway by himself. Then we have Sally, and Sally is an actress that, you know, all she wants to do is become a great final girl, and, you know, something tells me her wishes might be granted here. So Max discovers this camera that comes with a warning. I mean, that's the first sign, Max, like, bruh, it comes with a warning, why are you touching it? But he decides to use it anyway, and he's convinced that by using that in his next movie, it's going to make it the most terrifying movie ever. And he gets Sally to play also in his movie, and things obviously don't go really great with this camera because, like I said, it is possessed, probably, possibly by a demon. The Midnight Feast by Lucy Foley, and this is a mystery thriller. I think Lucy Foley, from what I have gathered from other books that I have talked about by her, I have only read, I think, one by her, and it was not exactly my cup of tea, but she does have often the trope of placing a group of people somewhere, and then there is a mystery or a murder that has to be solved. So for people that love that kind of trope, you know, that kind of setup, this is another one for you. They are opening a new place, The Manor, and there is everything that they've ever wanted. They throw all the money for this welcoming party, you know, with the drinks and a lot of presents for the guests and the best food that you can imagine. The manor is also next to some woods, and you know, the party's going great, but then on a Sunday they received a call from a police officer that says there's been a fire in this woods and there's been a body that has been discovered, and that body is related to the people that were there for the party. So now we have to figure out who is responsible for the dead body. What You Leave Behind by Wanda M. Morris, and this is another mystery thriller. We have the trope of our main character that has lost her mother, her job, and her partner, and now is looking for a fresh start. So she goes back to her childhood home, and she starts to realize that there are old people still living there, And funny enough, these people seem to be dying, and then the property is immediately bought by one of these developer companies. And it starts to get really suspicious to the point where our main character is going to investigate and try to get to the bottom of things. And I'm really intrigued about this story. I've only read, I think, one other book that had that kind of themed, and that was The Horror by David Sodergren, where big investment companies want to buy the properties because they want to convert it into a golf field. And I think it's not something that comes up a lot in books. And I think it's really interesting to explore it. There was also something similar about gentrification in a movie. There was a Prime exclusive. It was called Bingo Hell. So I'm really excited to see how they approach this kind of theme in this thriller. Craft Stories That I Wrote for the Devil by Ananda Lima. And these are, of course, short horror stories. At a Halloween party in 1999, a writer slept with the devil. After that, she keeps seeing the devil throughout the years, and these short stories are those encounters. If you ask me, this sounds amazing. I love the premise. I think it's such a unique and interesting take in order to bring us short horror stories that are all obviously about the devil. So I'm intrigued about this one, to say the least. We Used to Live Here by Marcus Klewer, and this is a mystery thriller, and I have pre-ordered this one simply because it's being turned already into a Netflix movie with Blake Lively, and I think it's already coming out this year. And I've heard other people talking about it, saying that it was great, and it was on sale on Amazon for the pre-order. Sometimes when you are still able to do pre-orders, Amazon would really drastically drop the prices before publication day, and so I snatched it. And I'm really excited to read it because I do want to read this one before the movie comes out. We follow a young queer couple that flips houses, and finally they have found the home of their dreams and they decide to move in there. And one day they receive a knock on the door. Someone comes knocking, and it's a man with a couple kids, and he says, "Oh, we used to live here." Title of the book. And wow, I'm so smart. Anyway, so they let him go in because he wants to show the house to the kids, you know, the house where he used to live. And weird things start to happen the moment that they get in. Plus, one of the kids disappears and it turns into a nightmare. But then also Charlie, one of the new homeowners, disappears without a trace. And this can be potentially quite unsettling because you have strangers coming into your house. They tell you, you know, "Oh, I used to live here." Did he? Did you check? No, you didn't. You just were like, "You're too good," and you're like, "Oh, sure, come in, take a look." Who would do that? Who would do that? You don't do that, man. So yeah, it sounds really interesting. And also, why is the kid disappearing, and why does Charlie then disappear? Like, I'm truly intrigued about this. Middle of the Night by Riley Sager, another mystery thriller. I don't need to tell you, but of course I pre-ordered this one as well. You know, I'm going to read every Riley Sager. They might not all hit perfectly for me, but I love to read them. One summer night, Ethan and Billy are friends. They are kind of camping in a cul-de-sac and having a good time. They go to sleep in their tent and everything. But then the next morning, Billy is missing and the tent has been kind of sliced open. So it seems like someone opened the tent, grabbed Billy, and since then the kid has been missing. 30 years later, Ethan is forced to return to his childhood home. He is plagued by nightmares and he has insomnia. And on top of that, he starts to see things and feel things that remind him of Billy. He finds things, I believe, that belong to Billy. And so he starts to wonder if Billy is back from whatever he disappeared 30 years ago, or he just doesn't know what's going on. So is this a supernatural thing? Did Billy disappear and reappear? We don't know. I mean, it's Riley Sager at this point, after The House Across the Lake. Anything goes. Anything goes. If you read that book, if you know, you know. So I'm just going in and just gonna enjoy the ride. Wrong Neighbor by Caleb Crowe, and this is another thriller. Megan and Nick married and moved into their dream house. They are having the time of their life in the new place when the neighbors come back from holidays, and they seem to be not the best neighbors ever. They make a lot of noise. They play like movies in the middle of the night really loud, and they're starting to annoy them. On top of that, they have, I think, 4 dangerous dogs that are always barking, also in the middle of the night. And then they kind of get into a fight with them because they want to claim part of their garden or something. And it's kind of like a fight between the neighbors. They're basically the neighbors from hell. And then Megan also gets pregnant, so they're very concerned about everything. So this seems like a potential domestic thriller as well. Next we have When I Look to the Sky, All I See Are Stars, and that is by Steve Stredd, and this is a horror novella. We follow a psychiatrist that thinks that she has already seen it all, that is until she meets David. David claims that he is 400 years old, so she thinks, okay, he has maybe split personality disorder, and that is the diagnosis that David gets. But then as time goes by and there's more interviews and more treatments with David, they realize that maybe there's a little bit of truth on what David is saying, because he knows things and says things that could kind of justify that he's 400 years old. So she calls, I think, another colleague to try to get to the bottom of things. So this one sounds like bonkers and really interesting. I believe David also claims that he's possessed by a demon or something like that, so this book might have that kind of like supernatural element to it. It is a novella though, it's true, it's a novella, so it is a short read. So if you're looking for more horror novellas to add to your list, this one might be one for you. Known to the Victim by K.L. Armstrong, and this is another thriller. I feel like so many thrillers are coming out in June. I mean, they are kind of the perfect summer read. Amy's mother is brutally murdered by her boyfriend, and Amy is having a really hard time coping with that, obviously, and she kind of neglects her job, her friends, and everything, and she becomes a little bit of a stranger to everybody. And then her kind of half-brother that she hadn't seen in a long time comes back into her life and offers her a home, offers her like family and comfort, and she doesn't think twice and starts, you know, living with the half-brother. 8 years later, our main character has her life together and she decides to make something good out of her horrible experience. So she creates this true crime podcast in order to help women that are going through the same thing, in order to also address violence against women. But then Oliver, her half-brother, is accused of a heinous crime, and she starts to wonder if you can even trust your own family. And so she's probably gonna go through the trenches all over again, so a lot of trauma in this book. Next we have another YA book. We have Six of Sorrow by Amanda Linsmeyer, and this is YA horror fantasy. 16 years ago, 6 girls were born on the same day, and now, on their birthday, one of them goes missing. So we follow these 6 girls that are besties, they are best friends, but they're also birthday sisters because they were all born on the same day. So that's a lot of a coincidence. There must be something there, right? So it is when one of the girls disappears during a birthday party that they all start to worry. She does come back a couple of days later, but she seems to be changed. She seems to be really sick. She doesn't remember what happened to her. So, you know, is giving My Best Friend's Exorcism and The Return vibes. Just gonna wait on the neighbors, and when they're done drilling and killing, we will resume our program. Their friend's disappearance and then reappearance has kind of created a stronger bond between all of the 6 girls. However, another girl ends up going missing from the 6, so they start to think that someone is coming for every single one of them. So what is happening to these girls that share the same birthday? We Shall Be Monsters by Tara Seam, and this is the first book of a new series, and the series is going to be called We Shall Be Monsters, and it is a YA fantasy horror. All that I know is that this is supposed to be a Frankenstein retelling, but with a lot of Indian mythology. and I think that sounds extremely interesting. So Kajal's sister suddenly dies, and Kajal is having a really hard time coping with it. So she wants to perform a ritual to kind of resurrect her sister before her soul crosses over and she cannot pull her back anymore. However, her sister has already turned into a wraith, and she's basically a very dangerous spirit that is trying to kill people, and so it's not going to be as easy to bring her back as she thought. So even though this is fantasy, it does have a supernatural slash horror element to it. So if you guys love that combination of fantasy and horror, this is one that you might want to try. Teleportasm by Joshua Millikan, and this is horror, and I love these books. It's part of these VHS kind of horror collection. I've only read Candy Kills from this collection, but I think this is a very promising collection of horror. I love the cover design. Four friends find a very unique VHS tape that gives them the power to do like short distance teleportation, but they also experience some kind of euphoria after effects. I think they make copies of the original tape, and every time they copy it and every time people see it, it starts to get worse and worse. I mean, if something we've learned from Ring is never watch VHS tapes that are cursed. Like, just don't, like, why do you do that? So cursed VHS tapes is something that I love to see in horror, so this is one that I need to read. The Eyes Are the Best Part by Monica Kim, and this is a horror thriller. And let me read you the pitch for this book because I think it sounds fantastic. It is a feminist psychological horror about the making of a female serial killer from a Korean American perspective. We follow a woman whose life is literally crumbling down. She has had an affair outside of the marriage. Her family is really disappointed. She's failing college and she feels judged by everybody, and she starts to get really pissed. She starts to get really angry, and she starts to notice how people are looking at her with those eyes, and she starts fantasizing about hurting people. Yeah, female rage, serial killer, give it to me. Plus, I would love to read some Korean American representation here as well. And I mean, this cover, this cover is fantastic. Honest, I don't know if this is a book about cannibalism or not. I kind of would like to get surprised if I get to this book, but it's definitely really calling me because a female serial killer is not something that you often see in books or even in real life. So I'm really excited. The Bitter Truth by Shannara Williams, and this is a mystery thriller. We follow Jo, and she's trying to support her husband that wants to be the new governor, so she's trying to help him in his, you know, politics journey, and she wants to prove to the world that she's a lot more than just a trophy wife. That is until one day Jo and her husband start to see the same woman everywhere. After they start seeing these women, things in the campaign are going really wrong. Like there's a change in the agenda that they didn't predict, but there's also a lot of accidents going on. Like everything is just going downhill for the campaign. The husband is also acting absolutely terrified, and I ask myself, is he terrified because he knows this woman? And so Jo starts to investigate, and she starts to find more about the husband's past. And as we know, what happens when you start digging deeper, you're gonna find things that you're not gonna like. Two Sides to Every Murder by Danielle Valentine, and this is a YA mystery thriller. Olivia was born during the Camp Lost Lake murders, and everybody knows her as the baby that was born during the massacre, but now it's been 16 years later and Olivia wants answers. She needs answers because she has just discovered that her father is actually not her biological father, so she wants to find out who was, and for that, of course, she's gonna have to return to the camp where the massacre happened. On the other side, we follow Regan, and her mother was accused of one of the murders in this massacre, but she's determined to clear her mom and prove that she's innocent. So of course, Olivia and Regan will meet at the camp, and they will work together to try to figure out what happened during the massacre, and also try to figure out who is Olivia's biological dad. This sounds like it's going to be the perfect summer read. We love a good camp massacre. Latency by Chris Koppel, and this is horror. We are in a police department where, you know, normally in police departments, always the evil is always human. They are always responsible for the crimes. But then a couple of detectives are starting to work on some cold cases, and they start to notice something that is relating all the cases together, and it's pointing to a different type of evil. Some of the worst cases, the worst unsolved murders of the town might be connected to creatures. So this is interesting because normally the narrative is we think it's supernatural or creatures, and then it ends up being a human evil, and this is flipping it. So we think at the beginning is a human evil, but then it turns out it might be a creature feature. Last but not least, we have Incidents Around the House by George Mallerman, and this is paranormal horror. Now, George Mallerman has been also kind of like a hit or miss for me. There's been a couple that I really enjoyed and a couple that were not my cup of tea, but I'm always intrigued to check his books, so I'm definitely gonna check this one because I do love the premise. Also, the story is told from the perspective of a young girl and something or someone that she calls Other Mommy. We follow an 8-year-old girl and we kind of see the world from her eyes. You know, she has her granddad, mom, dad, but then there's something else in the house that she calls Other Mommy. So who is this other mommy? Is it an entity, something supernatural? It immediately reminded me of the movie Mama, and I'm really excited for this also because it's quite unique to have a horror tale told from the perspective of a kid. And it might be interesting because kids have a different way of explaining things and accepting what they're seeing, you know, something that we as adults process in a very different way. So I'm intrigued to see how he puts that on the page. And then of course Other Mommy is going to ask Bella, our main character, to do things for her if she wants to keep her family safe. This is the story about a family that is as haunted as their home, and I'm intrigued. And these were, you guys, all the new releases that I wanted to talk to you about. These are some thriller and horror books that are coming out in the month of June. I hope there was something here that you guys enjoyed. I'm sorry if, as always, I increase your wish list for books. Trust me, it happens to me too. As I've mentioned, I have pre-ordered some of these books just by doing the list. I'm like, I'm gonna need this, I'm gonna need that. But anyways, I hope that you did enjoy it. I hope that you learned about new books that you didn't know that were coming out, that maybe you are really excited about now. And let me know down below if there's any other books in June that are coming out that I did not mention that you're really excited about. And I hope to see you all, as always, you guys, in our next coffee time. Bye!